look, this is an NIL casualty. We just got to get used to it. And for us,
no, we don't have to get used to it.
Yeah,
no,
it's not changing, Greg. So yes,
then their numbers are going down. Nobody's going to watch.
I
hope we're taking
that bullshit.
How is it not bullshit? People like parity.
People aren't going to watch the NCAA
like
tournament. If people don't want to watch the NCAA tournament because 15 seed Norfolk State.
I didn't say they wouldn't watch the tournament. They're not going to watch the first two rounds.
And then Jim, they're going to watch everything. They are going to watch everything because you can bet on it, and more people are betting on sports than ever before.
Jim, all those people that
we find a way to whine about everything. I mean,
hey, I don't whine about everything, but it's just a fact. Jim, all those people that have all those scheduled appearances that are going to come there those first 2 days in Vegas, what do you think is going to happen to them? Are they going to keep coming?
No. Yep.
No.
They will.
No.
They will.
I agree with Andy. Of course they will.
The thing that's going to drive this is that if the Cinderellas don't have let's say there's 68 teams, but only the way it's going now, we're going to have only 30 teams, 35 teams, maybe 40 teams that have any chance, any prayer whatsoever to win, because all the good players, and they should. Now, I read this article where forget the NIL, because the NIL only really attracts the real upper scale people, the players that are going to all be NBA pros anyway. So that's a little bit different. It's the portal. Here's a kid. Yep. He transfers from a school where he's playing 40 minutes. He goes to another school. He gets $20,000 for the portal, a 1-year deal. He goes there. He gets his $20,000. Now he's only playing 15 minutes because the school is better and they have better athletes. So he's there. He's sitting on the bench now. But he got his $20,000. What does he do at the end of the year? He finds another school to give him $15,000 because he didn't play much the year before, so he didn't get as much. But he moves for another $15,000. Now he's only playing 10 minutes a game. So this is what's going. That's the portal that's more the problem than the NIL.
But that's one type. There's also the type like Dalton Connect, who becomes one of the top players in the country, going from Northern Colorado to Tennessee. And this happens all the time. It's the same thing with coaches. We've had this for decades on end. Phil Martelli Jr. just took the VCU job. Is he ready for that? The only reason he got the Bryant gig is because their head coach got into some hot water legally. And 2 years later, now Martelli Jr. is at VCU. You strike when the iron's hot. I'll never begrudge a kid an opportunity that's really what this boils down to. Because
Tony, I agree with you. I want the kids to be able to make the money because
that's what we're at about it.
They've been getting screwed over for years. Mm-hmm. The schools were making all the money. They got all the TV contracts, and the kids are getting shit. And they're getting educations, but a lot of them can't use those educations. They get out and they're still bagging groceries in the grocery store. They could have done 4 years earlier.
The problem is the transfer portal. It's the old ways. You had to sit out a year. I never thought that was fair, but you should limit the number of opportunities that you can have. Maybe you can transfer once, no more than twice, but I'd like to see only one time during transfer. Otherwise, what's the value of it? You're not a college student. You're a basketball player, and don't try to make anything there. You're there to play basketball and maybe make it to a pro league. So, transferring should be restricted to the way, maybe not quite as restrictive as it was before, but you get one opportunity to transfer and that's it.
How about if they transfer and sign a 2-year deal where they have to remain there for 2 years? That might help a little bit.
Then get a lawyer to avoid themselves out of a 2-year deal.
The other X factor in this whole equation is COVID. We're still dealing with people in college for their 7th season. Some are coming back for an 8th next year because they got an extra COVID year. Once that's out of the way, and certain litigation takes hold, I think we'll see a cleaner system.
Andy, I agree with you, but I think the problem here is we have one thing that's sorely lacking. We have lack of legislation of anything that the transfer portal is going to be able to do favorably moving forward, because the NCAA has no balls. They are not a factor here in this equation anymore, and they need to be. This is the wild west out there right now.
To address Greg's concern about parity, we may very well see in the next 5 years pretty much what they did in football. Okay, remember the old 1A, 1AA? Well, now you have the FBS, FCS. You may have the 4 or 5 major conferences. Let's throw the Big East in there and maybe 1 or 2 other.
Exactly.
And you get 68, 70 teams, and that'll become like Division 1A or the FBS, or let's call it the championship division, and then the secondary division of every other school. So that you will now have an NCAA tournament that has a field of maybe 68, and they're all from major conferences, and the other and they can have at the lower level like they do with the FCS playoffs.
What's amusing is the 2025 tournament.
I agree, Andy. That's exactly what's going to happen.
The 2025 tournament has one Cinderella, quote unquote, one lower seed that everybody's going to remember.
Arkansas.
No, it's McNeese. Well, that's funny. Yeah,
oh, okay. I'm talking about the Sweet 16.
Yeah, but I'm talking.
Technically, they're a Cinderella because they're a double-digit seed.
McNeese first 2 days, that smaller school that won, comprised entirely of larger school transfers that kind of fell out of favor of their schools.
Yep.
With Will Wade, who already had a deal in place when he was coaching them.
I didn't do the numbers, but I have to believe, even with the conference realignments, that the major conferences got more of the at-large bids than they did in recent years. When you'd have the Atlantic 10 get a couple of extra bids, you might have the MAC might get the MAC and/or the Missouri Valley. There were very few true at-large mid-major bids available this year, and that's why we're seeing. Because I know this is one of the topics that Mark put in the agenda. I think right at the top, why there are no Cinderella teams this year. It's because there were not as many Cinderella bids that were offered.
So if
you have 14
Congress
teams.
mandated an investigation, guys, into what's going on in the NCAA basketball tournament, and they did their work, what would their conclusion be? Would it be that the transfer portal has been the biggest culprit? The NCAA lack of anything being the culprit, or the fact that
if they truly believe that these are college student athletes, the transfer portal would be all but eliminated. You go to school for an education. If you're a good basketball player, you get a scholarship, so you don't pay for your education.
And what about a power conference that puts 14 of its 16 teams in the tournament?
Yeah. How many athletes in the transfer portal? How many athletes in the transfer portal ever said, I transferred from Drake to Wisconsin because I didn't like the academic structure at Drake?
Well, yeah.
You don't hear anybody say that.
But now we're getting into. Now we're not lying about things anymore.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, I heard Mike Slive on TV. He said we're putting more money into basketball, and these are the results. That's it.
Yep. The biggest issue is not the transfer portal.
It's going to be more successful.
I want to. Maybe somebody knows this answer, and I really don't know the answer to this. So I'm really asking because I really don't know, and I'd like to know what happens when a coach leaves and he goes to another school and he takes 1 or 2 kids with him from the school, or even sometimes maybe even more, and sometimes nobody. They just go.
Right.
When he takes those athletes from the school he was at, to the school he's going to. And what happens to the athletes that are on the school he's going to that already are playing basketball, and there's only so many kids can be on the roster?
Well, let's answer that with Schertz, who took over from 2024 Darling Indiana State, and went to St. Louis, took his best players with him.
Right.
Essentially, he created vacancies. There were spots to be filled that he filled with guys that followed him over from the Sycamores, and he basically said, "Oh, you have a chance to stick on this team, or I'm going to encourage you to transfer." I mean, it's big boy time now.
Yeah, well, I already told you that, Jim. We talked about it. The fact is that if there are not enough scholarships, then the coach will sit the players that were already on the team in their office and tell them, just like Tony said, a grown-up talk. Yep. Look, you're not going to play here, so you need to transfer. I mean, it's just the bottom line.
The other night I had dinner with somebody that played for Texas A&M many years ago, and he said, he's a doctor, he's not a dumb guy, he's a smart guy. I said, what happens? This same question. And he said, well, once you have the scholarship, they can't pull the scholarship, but they can knock you off the team. But now you got a basketball scholarship and you're not playing at the school anymore.
Well, that just won't really happen, though. No kid is just going to sit in school with a scholarship and not play. He's going to want to play. He'll transfer. It's just no one's ever going to be like that.
Dion did it at Colorado. I mean, he got criticized initially, and that was that.
And look, to me, the biggest problem is the NIL. It's not the transfer portal. It's because the NIL is the reason why players will constantly go from the mid-major programs to the big programs, because they have the money. Before in the transfer portal, you would just say they go from mid-major to mid-major. There's a spot open. I'll go follow this coach. That's fine. But now they're following the money. And that's why all the money and all the players are going to the big programs, which is why that there are no more Cinderellas this year, because all of those players, I mean, look at these great teams that we thought were great teams in the mid-majors, the Akrons or any of the Liberties. We thought that they were great, really mid-major teams, but then we found out that they weren't very good at all if you stack them up against all these other dominant players in the power programs. And so again, look, to me, I said this 25 years ago, that the NBA was going to be fucked if they kept up with this one and done shit. And look what's happening to the NBA today in their ratings. Nobody wants to see this shit. Same thing's going to happen in college basketball. College basketball has two big identifications with it: March Madness, Cinderella. Both are going to go in the garbage. When you lose Cinderella and March Madness, you're not going to, I'm sorry, you are not going to grow the sport. It's going to be the NBA and the ratings will go down. I am telling you right now, but you can fix it. I really believe they can fix this and find a way, as Andy said, come up with some solutions. I liked Andy's solution. I think they will come up with solutions. They're not stupid enough, maybe they are, to let this cash cow disappear.
Ironically, guys, this is the highest ratings that the NCAA basketball tournament ever had through the first two rounds.
Yes, absolutely. And I very much disagree, because the NBA, there's a ton wrong with the NBA right now. Luka Doncic's game against the Dallas Mavericks was the most watched game in the regular season in decades. I mean, we have more options now. That's just all it is. And as far as the NIL goes, it needs to be tweaked. But schools need to be more responsible with how they dole it out. UCF's entire football season was shot this past year because they gave all this money to KJ Jefferson, benched him within the first month. You want to talk Kansas? Hunter Dickinson was the highest paid player in NIL. Had a decent year. Analytically, he did great. Look where Kansas ended up. Coleman Hawkins, $2 million to go to Kansas State. They made a run, 1-2 years ago? Didn't even have a winning record in the Big 12.